This year I've had the opportunity to do extensive wine travel, and I've also attended a number of different trade tastings. As such, I'm familiar with a large number of the new releases, especially from a number of the top producers. And in this video, I'm going to be identifying 5 of my absolute favorite collectible wines that are available in the market today. The first top collectible wine comes from one of my favorite producers on Bordeaux's left bank. This producer is a second growth in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux and is located in Saint-Julien. They have 75 hectares that are planted to 70% Cabernet Sauvignon and 30% Merlot. In fact, not so long ago, they ripped out all their Petit Verdot so that they could increase the amount of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. They're also using organic farming methods, which seems to have made some slight improvements to the wine as well. This first wine is the 2020 Ducru Beaucaillou. This wine matured in 100% new French oak for 18 months, and this blend consists of 81% Cabernet Sauvignon and 19% Merlot. Descriptors for this wine include blackberry, violets, crushed rock, tobacco, pencil lead, and cedar. This is one that will definitely benefit from another 8 to 9 years minimum in your cellar, but it will drink effortlessly for decades thereafter. I recently saw it selling for around $240 per bottle, and it received a perfect 100-point score from Jeb Dunnick. The next top collectible wine is from an outstanding historic Spanish producer that was founded way back in 1852. This is one of the very few Rioja producers that makes wine exclusively from its own estate vineyards. In only the finest vintages, Marqués de Murrieta produces a Castillo Ygay Gran Reserva Especial. The 2012 vintage of this wine is already being compared to 2 legendary vintages, namely 1934 and 1964, and has already received 1 perfect score from James Suckling. The fruit for this wine comes from an 80-year-old single vineyard that's located at the highest point within the Ygay Estate. They use 81% Tempranillo and 19% Mossuelo for this wine. Interestingly, the Tempranillo matures for 34 months in 225-liter American oak barrels, whereas the Mossuelo matures in French oak barrels. After blending, the wine matures for about 1 year in concrete and then another 2 years in bottle. Due to the extended aging at the estate, this one can already be enjoyed now with perhaps a 20 to 30 minute decant, but it will certainly cruise in your cellar for decades as well. In fact, 64 Gran Reserva Especials are still showing well to this day. Unfortunately, production volumes were down about 30% from the also excellent 2011 vintage. I purchased some of the 2011 from my cellar back in August as I really enjoyed that wine at a tasting. That one sells for around $210, and it's still worth adding to your collection if you can find it on shelves now. However, the 2012 vintage will cost you probably around $275 or so. This is unfortunately a pretty big step up in terms of price, but it's also a potentially legendary vintage that's arguably going to be one of the 3 top vintages for this wine in the last 90 years or so. So if you decide to add this one to your collection, I definitely think that you'll be very glad that you did. Iconic Italian winery Ornellaia is located in Bolgheri, adjacent to Sassicaia, and is definitely one of the most prestigious Super Tuscan producers. Ornellaia was founded in 1981 by Marchese Lodovico Antinori, and its first vintage was in 1985. There have been a number of outstanding world-class vintages of Ornellaia over the years, including 1998, 2006, 2009 and 10, 2015 and 16, and now 2021. So the next top collectible wine is the 2021 Ornellaia. 2021 was an absolutely phenomenal vintage on the Tuscan coast. The 2021 Ornellaia was well received by critics and even includes a couple 99-point scores. This wine sells for about $250 per bottle. This is a wine that's a Bordeaux blend that consists of a little bit more than 50% Cabernet Sauvignon, 1/4 Merlot, and then there's smaller percentages of Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. Interestingly, they mature the fruit separately in 70% new French oak for 1 year, then they blend it and mature it in barrel for another 6 months, and then they bottle it and age it for another year before they finally release it. This is a full-bodied wine with black and blue fruit, licorice, mocha, dried herbs, and floral notes. One quick side note before we move on to the next top collectible wine. If you're interested in watching wine movies, there's an excellent one called Mondovino, which captures some of the drama surrounding the ownership of Ornellaia. The next top collectible wine is another one of the very best vintages ever produced by an iconic winery, and it's a wine that not only flirts with perfection, but actually received at least one perfect 100-point score. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. The next top collectible wine is the 2021 Dominus Estate from Napa Valley. This wine is a blend that consists of 95% Cabernet Sauvignon and 5% Cabernet Franc. This wine matured in 40% New French oak. This is a wine that will definitely be better with at least another 8 or so years of bottle age on it, but you can definitely enjoy it for decades after that. For those unfamiliar with Dominus Estate, it actually traces its roots way back to 1836, when George Yount planted some of the very first grapevines in Napa Valley near what is now aptly named Yountville. 145 years later, Christian Moex purchased this historic vineyard, which is called Napanook. Prior to this acquisition, Mr. Moex managed some of his family's Bordeaux properties, which included famous and prestigious wineries such as Château Petrus, Les Fleurs Petrus, and Trotanois in Pomerol. Mr. Moex immediately began implementing some of the very same principles that his family had used to produce high-quality Bordeaux for many years, both in the vineyard and in the winery. And before long, Dominus Estate was producing world-class wines as well. Some of the specific techniques that Dominus Estate uses include organic and sustainable farming practices. Among other things, they're big fans of dry farming, which helps to ensure that the roots dig deep in search of water and nutrients. The result is lower yields with small grapes that have high skin-to-juice ratios and which produce intensely concentrated fruit. While these wines become extremely impressive about 10 years after the vintage, they also age well for decades. And in fact, I recently had the 1991 vintage, which is still extraordinary and showing remarkably well to this day. The 2021 Dominus Estate will set you back around $375. At that price, it's definitely the most expensive wine in this video. For that reason, I'm also going to give you a bit of a twofer, and that is Dominus Estate also makes a second wine that's called Napanook and sells for only around $95 per bottle. Napanook is a blend of fruit from the historic Napanook vineyard that was selected for its early maturing characteristics, lively fruit, and soft tannins. Napanook is certainly a wine that will age for a while, but it's designed to be enjoyed on release. Dollar for dollar, it's probably one of the most compelling values in Napa Valley, as I enjoy this wine much more than some wines that cost quite a bit more than this one. Laurent-Perrier's house style is characterized by freshness, finesse, and structure, but given the vintage variation in Champagne, it was very difficult to produce an exceptional prestige cuvée from a single vintage. Laurent-Perrier's solution was to produce a multi-vintage cuvée that they named Gran Siécle. In so doing, they were able to recreate the perfect vintage. Gran Siécle, which means Great Century, was inspired by the era of the Sun King, Louis XIV. It was during this era that fine wine first became to be appreciated. As a tribute, you will find the Sun King symbol on every bottle of Laurent-Perrier's Gran Siécle. To produce Gran Siécle, Laurent-Perrier blends the fruit from 3 complementary vintage years from declared vintages. For example, the current release of Gran Siécle is number 26. This vintage contains a majority of fruit from the outstanding 2012 vintage, but also has 1/4 of fruit from the stellar 2008 vintage and another 10% or so of fruit from 2007. This fruit is from 100% Grand Cru sources and is 58% Chardonnay and 42% Pinot Noir. It aged an impressive 10 years on the lees before it was disgorged. This impressive champagne was James Suckling's Wine of the Year for 2023 and was well received by pretty much all critics who reviewed it. This champagne sells for about $250 per bottle. I've enjoyed this wine several times, and it's always been extremely impressive. This wine has featured descriptors that include pear, apple, mandarin, whetstone, gunflint, brioche, and much more. There's ample acidity to balance these flavors, and there's a rich, creamy texture that's extremely impressive, along with a very long, complex finish. This is definitely a very age-worthy champagne as well, but it's certainly one that's also showing well on release. You really can't go wrong with this champagne. In addition to the wines that I've recommended in this video, my other strongest recommendation for collectible wines is 2019 Brunello di Montalcino. While I didn't discuss any specific Brunello in this video, I did recently do a comprehensive video on 2019 Brunello, and if you're interested in that, please be sure to check out this video that's linked above.